I am now recording, so welcome to the Public Square series. This is a very exciting panel that we have on a very exciting topic. There are probably a million things. We could host Public Square every week for the rest of the year and still have tons and tons to talk about regarding what the gender gap means. So we're not trying to be comprehensive or exhaustive, but we are interested in discussing some of the ways that the gender gap manifests itself and some of the things that we are doing to combat it and what it means for you and how it can affect your lives. So before we get into the real meat and potatoes of the event, I just wanted to lay down a couple of ground rules, let everyone know that no disrespectful comments will be tolerated. Those who do not respect others in the Q&A or chat will be removed from the panel. So please do respect everyone else and understand that reciprocity is a value that we have and believe in. Also, the Center for Fraternity and Sorority Life may take disciplinary measures for those who engage in disrespectful conduct and behavior here. Immediately following this event, we will send a link out to your the email address that you use to register for this event. You will be able to click that link and submit your impact. Please submit an impact for 1 hour or the time that you were able to attend. So with that having said, we would like to offer a land acknowledgement, and I give the time to Sophia Gaither, one of our panelists today, to do that. Sophia.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And welcome, everyone. First, I want to, of course, say thank you for inviting me to this program. And now for those land acknowledgements, Washington State University acknowledges that it is located on statewide or on the homelands of the Native peoples. We have lived in this region from immemorial time. Currently, there are 43 tribes, 36 which are federally recognized, that share traditional homelands and waterways in what is now Washington State. Some of these are confederacies that represent multiple tribes and bands. Washington State University Pullman is located on the ancestral homelands of the Palouse people and on the ceded lands of the Nez Perce tribe. The university expresses its deepest respect for and gratitude to these original caretakers of the region. As an academic community, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with these tribes and Native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching, research, and programming. Now, I would like to go ahead and transition this program back to our host, Erin Thompson.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you very much to the Center for Civic Engagement for inviting me to moderate the panel today. I'm really excited for the discussion, and it falls right in line with some other work I've been doing within the Murrow College. I am a scholarly assistant professor there, teach Com 102 public speaking and crisis communication courses, and we've been hosting some panels about the Black Lives Matter movement and other social justice things. So this falls right in line with that, and I'm really excited to take on the gender gap today. As Dave said, certainly not enough time within an hour to have a comprehensive conversation about this, but I'm really looking forward to hearing from each of our panelists and having a really lively and fruitful Q&A with our participants today. So what I'll do is just briefly introduce each panelist by name, and then they will give each of you they'll give you each an introduction of themselves, bit of a background, and then they'll each speak for a little bit about their perception of the gender gap, what that means to them, some of their experiences. I'll monitor the chat as well as the Q&A, and our co-hosts will do that as well. So we will try to keep up with questions as we go. We'll save some time for questions at the end as well. So I'd like to first turn things over to Jackie Sedano to introduce herself and tell you a little bit about who she is. Let's do a quick intro from each of you, and then we'll circle back around and have you do a bit longer talk about what the gender gap means to you, okay?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Sedano. I am a new face on Wazoo campus this semester. This is my first semester working as the program coordinator for the Campus Women's Center. So I'm really, really excited to be here. I'm excited to meet all the folks who are on this panel, to see that there's so many students. Oh my gosh, like 600. There's so many people who are coming to this event. So I think that that's a fantastic thing. And I think it speaks to the values of Wazoo campus students.
Absolutely. All right, let's turn things over to Brandon. Brandon Cockburn, if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Awesome. Thank you so much. First of all, yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to this. I know a lot of people are probably like, what is this white boy doing here talking about a gender gap? So I hope like my time in academia and teaching and everything and education can speak to that. So I just wanted to say that real quick. But I'm a second year doctorate student in the Cultural Studies and Social Thought of Education at Wazoo. I've taught a course, University 100, and I'm currently working at the Center for Civic Engagement as the community programs assistant. So I help create conversations with our community partners. And my work focuses a lot on issues of equity, particularly about queer students within secondary education and how they kind of navigate that space with agency. So thank you again for being here.
All right, that's fantastic. And I think it's important to mention, like Brandon said, that gender is not a women's issue, it's an everyone's issue, right? Just as race is not, an issue for people of color, it's an issue for everybody, and particularly, white allies when we're talking about race. And I think male allies when we're talking about gender, and all genders is going to be really important. So I'm glad that you brought that up right away. And then finally, we'll have Sophia introduce yourself.
Of course. Again, welcome everyone, and thank you all for having me. I am looking forward to our conversation with Jackie and Brandon. So glad that you're here to take part in this conversation as well. So I serve as the Associate Director in the Carson College of Business within the Carson Center for Student Success for Washington State University, and also faculty. So I also, some of you I may have you in my class for a career exploration course. So very very glad to be here. I also do serve within a capacity as the chair-elect for the President's Commission on the Status of Women. And so I'm definitely more of an advocate in this space than an expert. I feel like I'm always finding ways of how can I advocate on behalf of everyone. And it is a us work and not just a them over there. So thank you all.
Absolutely. And I think, at least in my experience, Sophia, you gain expertise through advocacy. At least I feel like I do. We continue to learn as we go, and we're all here to learn from each other. So I think that's really fantastic. So let's circle back around to Jackie. Jackie, if you would like to spend a little bit of time just talking to us about what the gender gap means to you and some of your own perspectives and experiences.
Yeah, so first I want to thank you all so much for inviting me here. I didn't thank y'all. I'm like, oh my goodness, I should have sent one. But also, I just want to reiterate something really quick before I get into this, is what Sophia was saying. I thought that a lot of the same thing, Sophia, when I had gotten the invitation. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm more of an advocate than an expert, because I do strongly believe that we never fully know everything, right? Like we're always on a learning journey, just like Erin and Sophia had both reiterated, like we're constantly learning, it's never done. So yeah, just talking about the gender gap and what does a gender gap mean to me? Oh my gosh, when I was thinking about this question, like David said, I could spend an hour on it every single week for the rest of the year, and I still wouldn't even scratch the surface of everything. But when I was thinking about this question, I just thought I would go ahead and tell you all my story, because I think that that is what's really valuable here, is my own personal experience and just what I've been through and how I got here. So I grew up in Idaho, in rural Idaho. So I grew up in a small town where cows outnumber people 3-to-1. So it's a very small town, and that's the kind of environment that I was growing up in. And I am a first generation Chicana here. So my parents immigrated over from Mexico, but they immigrated when they were pretty young. So I almost consider myself like a 1.5 generation here, because they were fairly young when they immigrated over here. But essentially, I had gone through some experiences as a child and as an adolescent that were rooted in trauma. And a lot of that was kind of the ripple effects I was seeing, but I didn't understand. I just had all these really strong feelings about myself and my situation and how people around me are responding to these situations, but I didn't have the words for it necessarily. I just had the feeling, and I just knew something was wrong. And even though people, essentially I had seen folks in my own family, folks in like family friends who had experienced interpersonal violence of some sort. And I had seen them essentially experience rape culture, and it just felt so terribly wrong to me, and it didn't make sense that officials were responding in specific ways, that it's a small town, so people talk, and people were responding in specific ways. And so I just knew in my heart, I knew I was being gaslit, but I didn't have that word until I came to college. But I just felt like, okay, everybody's telling me that this is like our fault, like we're to blame, but this doesn't feel right. So then when I was coming to college, because I was very determined to come to college as a first generation student, I looked up everything and anything that had to do with college. I like modeled my college experience after the movies, which I don't know if I recommend, but part of that was, Greek life, getting in all these organizations and clubs, and studying abroad. So I studied abroad, and when I was studying abroad, I had seen this course and it said gender studies. And I just didn't even think anything of it, honestly. I had just signed up for it. I'm like, I don't know how one studies gender, but that sounds fun. And that sounds fun. That was my reaction. You know what I mean? To a gender studies course, like now we know it's really getting to the nuances of gender dynamics, but I was like, this sounds fun. And there was the entire class was so amazing. My mind just expanded so much, but there was one day specifically where they were talking about victim blaming, where they were talking about rape culture, where they were talking about all of these things that had just validated the experience of myself, but also the women and queer folks in my life. Like I'm even getting goosebumps on my arm as I'm thinking about it, because I was sitting in that classroom and I was about, I think, 20 years old, just floored. I was just floored. I was like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. Yes, this makes sense. Like I've seen this before. I've seen this before. I've seen this in my loved ones. I've seen this in myself. Like this makes absolute total sense. So the gender gap is very personal for me. The personal is political, the political is personal. It was very personal for me. And I felt the fire right then and there. And so then when I came back, I just threw myself in this work. I changed my major to sociology. Oh, my earring fell off. To sociology with an emphasis on inequalities and globalization. I got my minor in women's and gender studies. I was taking every single gender related course I could. I was taking any kind of racial justice course I could. I was just really immersing myself in this work. I volunteered for Alternatives to Violence of the Palouse. I started working as a work study for the University of Idaho Women's Center, and then continued to work there as a full-time professional after graduating. And it was just this, I felt like my world had really opened. And so the gender gap to me is just, it's so personal and so important. Like it is something that I carry with me every single day. And when I really put words to the items that I was experiencing, or when I was really able to like articulate all those things, I just thought like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to try and do my part in addressing all of these issues, because it's just too much. It's unfair. It's unjust. And that's what the gender gap means to me. It's just something that I carry with me all the time, because I think of everyone in my family. I think of my loved ones. I think of those who I saw experience misogyny and whatnot in college. And it's just something that is very personal to me. And because it's personal to me, I feel very passionate about it. So that's why I'm here working for the Women's Center today.
Thank you so much, Jackie. You could not have started off with a more passionate and just like heartfelt explanation, which I think is so important. And when we have these kinds of conversations, it's not from an academic perspective, right? It has to be from that personal perspective, because like you said, it's personal and political, and they're all like combined together, and as a communication person, what you say about finally having the words to put those experiences, to make sense of them and to be able to communicate those with other people and have your own experiences validated is so incredibly important. So thank you for that and for getting us started off. Let's turn things back over to Brandon. And Brandon, how about you talk about your perspective and experiences for us?
Yeah, no, thank you. And once again, thank y'all so much for having me. And Jackie, I must say, like, I am sweating in my boots. I'm like, whoa, I can't even come close to that. Like, that was just beautiful narrative. So I'm gonna do my best, but I will say hats off to you and thank you for sharing that very personal and deep story with us. So Mine's not as personal per se, as once again, as we all can, as I am a white male, a queer white male at that, but my experience doesn't necessarily stem from personal experience dealing with types of sexism or genderisms, but rather just kind of my own experience within academia, within teaching, and through the lived experiences of those who I surround myself with. So my experience actually also started in academia, right? So I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, very white town, very red in some ways, and so there's aspects of that we don't need to delve into in this conversation, but there's very real lived realities of how we're expected to be, and a lot of those lived realities just didn't sit well with me in a lot of ways. So I went to college and I did STEM, so I actually majored in bio in undergrad, which never again. And I did this whole thing and I realized this just wasn't sitting right with me. Something was not right. So I decided to do my master's in education. So I went to the University of Illinois, Chicago. I did my master's in education, started taking some courses and did some critical theory work, and just loved it. Loved this aspect of like, yes, this is things that I feel like are so apparent, but also so hidden and so invisible. And especially depending on the world that you come from, right? Like I said, coming from this very white, very red, super centric way of being, and then moving into this other space is just so eye-opening. And then I ended up taking my first feminism class, and it was another world, another space that just, in a lot of ways that Jackie was talking about, it just gave me the language, the understanding, not necessarily for my own lived experiences, but for things that I saw, that I observed, that I felt like this isn't right, there's something wrong. How do we approach the situation? And learning so much more about like feeling of my privilege as a male, and feeling my privilege of being a white person. I have to use this privilege to be an ally, to do this work that needs to be done, while not necessarily overstepping and taking the platform, but helping give voice to those who need it. And not necessarily in a white savior way, but rather like, how can I amplify other people's voices with my own, or use my platform to amplify those voices around me. So really it came down to the lived experiences of not only myself, but also those around me. And just thinking about like, I always see these signs of like, oh, like, what if you had a daughter? Or like, what if you had your wife? And I'm like, well, they're like humans, like they're human beings. Like they don't have to have a direct relationship for you to care, right? You should care because they are human, because we as a society should always be working towards the greater good. And that greater good means equity and equality for all. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And a lot of my students are women of color. And I really think a lot about intersectionality, and like, how does this intersectionality affect my students? I taught high school science for a little bit. So how does that come into play? And then that obviously makes it a little bit more complicated, and then the nuances of that. So it's just really something that I'm dedicated to, and kind of, I also want to echo what everyone's saying is, I'm by no means an expert. I would never label myself an expert, but rather an advocate and ally, and somebody who's trying to do the right thing on a daily basis and get better. So that's my experience with the gender gap.
All right, thank you, Brandon. And I think you should definitely never discount your own experiences, right? Like, don't, act as if like, oh, I'm a white male, so I have somehow less, experience to share, right? And like you were saying, just being an advocate and being a true ally, where you're not trying to swoop in and like, save everybody, but to actually, work to use the privilege that you have to amplify the voices that need it. Like, that's incredibly powerful, right? And, we can tell from listening to you that you have a, really good background and passion for this too. So I think that's really great. And what you had to say about the demographics of where you grew up and the town that you came from, and how each of us has, a set of background and experiences that contribute to the way we see and experience the world. And, part of our education and our development is figuring out how we grow and how we interact with people who might be different from us and all of that. So thank you for that. And let's turn things to Sophia again and hear about your perspective and experiences.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin. First and foremost, thank you, Jackie. I want to honor the spaces that I'm sharing right now with Jackie and your story. Very, just very passionate, and truly appreciate you sharing your experiences. Those are really hard to share, to give us an insight into the light that you lived, and what has really directed and navigated what the work in your life work that you're doing right now. So I thank you for that. And Brandon, I so appreciate the fact that one, you're acknowledging, hey, I'm a white male, and I'm queer, I'm in this space with you. And I want to, and you're acknowledging the fact that you're coming into this space and you're wanting to support and you're wanting to serve as that ally. And thank you, Aaron, again, not discounting like your experiences, your perspective. It is again, it's something that we all need to hear, because it's a part of our growing. And I'm learning even in this moment, in this midst of where we are. I'm learning from you all, just from hearing from your backgrounds and your stories. So thank you. And so gosh, it just leaves me at this place to say, well, Sophia, where am I when we think about gender gaps and where I stand? And I thank you, Brandon, for bringing up intersectionality and talking about that. Oftentimes as a woman, and not just as a Black woman, Kimberly Crenshaw, who termed this whole thing of intersectionality, being a Black woman, we often feel like we are at the bottom, bottom of the barrel of when it comes down to, well, power and structure, right? And the systemic barriers. So who I am and where I'm from, I'm a Carolina girl. I'm from the South, deep South, rooted. My family, all of them were from the Carolinas. My grandparents, they were sharecroppers. And so if most people knew what sharecroppers were, most likely they were on the master's land, right? And so they were most likely enslaved individuals. My great grandparents were enslaved individuals. And so having that connection and having that direct connection to my grandparents who, they were tolling on a land and on a property that they never owned. And we've never seen that property again within our family, right? But just having those stories and that story, that line of just where we came from, and storytelling is so important to understand. We're not that far removed, right? That was my grandfather, and to know that my great grandparent, was most likely enslaved, there's that, like, hey, the structure of how this country was formed. Understand, it was not thousands or hundreds of years ago. It was just around the corner. So when we talk about gendered biases, they're set up in these societal norms that of traditionalism and of patriarchy. And so when I was reared up in the South, a lot of the traditionalism that I grew up within was very religious, right? It was very, religion drove a lot of my identity and who I was. And so listening and ensuring that, I had to, make sure that I was respectful and I knew my place and I was subordinate, and I understood that the man, he was the head of the household. Having all of those things again instilled in you as you're growing up, very much it was this identity that I did not truly realize was a part of who I was until I went to college. And I'm a first gen student as well. So being a first gen student, and none of my family members, I'm one of seven. So understand, one of seven kids, and being the youngest of seven, and having this opportunity to go to college and to truly understand who is Sophia, who is this person becoming, and then of course looking at the environment and what I grew up within, and understanding within that environment has instructed and it was the navigation of the beginnings of who I was. And so I had a lot of self work that had to do to understand, to love myself, to love who I was, not just as a woman, but as a Black woman, because there were oftentimes just if I wasn't getting it from my mom or someone who loved me, the world in itself painted just kind of this very sexist identity of what a Black woman is, right? From videos, music videos, to where we worked within society. And so one of the and that all with all of those, with that huge image of just, okay, who was I wanting to become? I took that opportunity to say, I want to break the stereotype. I want it to become something that my mother, my great grandmother, like they were not. And so definitely choosing higher education and seeing higher ed through was uh, just a passionate part of who I am today. And I love the individuals that I get to connect with within higher education. And it has helped me to begin this deconstruction of, well, what are all of the things that I gleaned from, and that has helped me to navigate in my spaces. And so within higher ed, I had my undergrad in English, so I pursued English as my undergrad, continued in higher ed, where I received my master's in higher education, in a great opportunity landed me here with Washington State University. So I've been here now for 5 years, and have enjoyed the perspective, the cultural differences that I've been able to engage in. And honestly, when it comes down to gender bias and the work that I've been doing within career services, the work that I have been advocating for women, I see it in the work that I do just within higher ed. I see it at the director's level when I'm the only woman sometimes, or the only Black woman in spaces where I'm having to fight off the imposter syndrome telling me that I don't belong somewhere, or I have to begin to put on a whole different hat to demonstrate my expertise and my knowledge, because I'm in the midst of heterosexual white men, or in the midst of a majority, because I'm the minority in a space where I'm having to consistently prove myself, right? And so having to just navigate this space consistently, and that being a part of just who I am, is one of the reasons why I'm here today. It's one of the reasons why I have taken a platform where I'm consistently advocating and wanting to let everyone and students, make them aware that you have the ability to stand up, to support, to be an ally, to ensure that your colleague, your peer, that that you're creating a sense of belonging. And that's what we're and when my whole story of everything, of who I am, I don't reject it at all. I know it's a part of, well, this is who I am and this is my story. And I want to basically in this and in who I am, I'm wanting to have a desire to create a belonging for everyone, so that you can hear diverse perspectives and hear where individuals are coming from, because that's when we can begin to truly tear down barriers, right? So I hope that there was a lot. There was a lot that I threw out there. I'm sorry. Get this started, but yeah. Let's go ahead. Let's start the conversation.
Yeah, no, I second the snaps coming from Brandon. I think that, just kind of was a perfect progression, of stories, and then just more discussion about the intersectionality. And Sophia, hearing you talking about having to navigate spaces that largely don't include people that look like you, right? And how difficult that can be, and how you have to fulfill these societal norms and put on these hats that are appropriate in these different spaces in order to be able to fit in to a certain extent, to get into the door, and then fight off that imposter syndrome. Like, there's so much going on that you're having to negotiate, and to try to do all of these things and focus on all of these things while just trying to learn and do a good job. Like, it's a lot. Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I wonder if Jackie had any any, follow up to any of that? I'm sure, maybe you had some similar experiences as far as navigating white male spaces and, coming to college as a first gen student. Do you want to speak to any of that?
So I actually think that this is a really, really interesting topic for me to talk about because I've had this conversation with a lot of friends and whatnot. And I think that, I'm trying to figure out a way to articulate this. Yes and no, essentially. Yes, because it's just a given. Like there are just rooms where the representation isn't there and the diversity isn't there and the inclusion isn't there. And so you are the only person of your identity. At the same time, I do think that people find me, and this is problematic, I think people do find me more palatable because I'm behaving academically. Like I'm using formal diction, I'm, conversing with them, essentially code switching, right? I'm like code switching to talk to the room and whatnot. And because of that, they're registering me, they're registering my opinions, which like I said, is problematic. It's a very complicated thing to navigate because there are times where I ask myself, like, I feel like I should just show up authentically and I can just be. But sometimes that internalization of, like Sophia was talking about, imposter syndrome, or that internalization of, well, this is like the, way that folks are behaving in this room. So it feels like that's how folks are going to register me. So maybe I could just speak formally and that's how they can like then converse with me in this. So it's like a yes and no situation for me because I do code switch to play the game, which like I said, it is problematic and it isn't something that, I'm saying everybody should do this. No way. And for myself, I don't even necessarily approve of it, but it's like survivorship. It's just a very complicated thing to navigate for yourself. And you're constantly having conversations with yourself. Am I sacrificing my authentic self so that my voice can be heard in this room? And if so, is it worth it? I don't know. So these things are so complicated. So when I'm asked that question, I just think like, it depends on the room. It depends on the room. But there are absolutely spaces where you can read allyship and you read that pretty immediately and it becomes a decolonized space. And you just kind of, you can just kind of like relax a little bit, let your hair down a little bit. And just talk normally as your authentic self would. And this is just for me. Like, I'm not speaking for anyone else. I'm just speaking for myself. And then there are rooms where I do feel I have to be more prim and proper and like speak more formally. And, essentially, I don't like saying this, but like lean into the culture of the office so that I can continue being successful in my work, because otherwise they might not register me as a successful person who has something to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like you have to figure out how to get into that space so that you can, then work into, a position maybe where you have that ability to bring your authentic self and, really contribute in that way. And I will have to say, like, the things that we women have to think about, like, just in terms of clothing, like what we're going to wear. So I was preparing for this panel today and thought like, well, what should I wear? Like, I need to look professional. And I was like, you know what? I have 2 t-shirts with Ruth Bader Ginsburg on them, and I'm absolutely going to wear one of them. So just a little shout out to RBG. And I put a little jacket over it to make it look more professional. But no offense to Brandon, but I'm looking at your North Face pullover and just being like, the white guy in the room can get away with wearing the North Face pullover, right? Like, my partner's a white guy. He wears flannel and beans every single day and doesn't have to worry about it. So, when we're talking about these kinds of issues, it's like the small things like that, which seem small, but like add up over time, right? And it's the kinds of things that we have to think about and, negotiate and navigate into any different kind of space that we go into. And it's like, how do you work to gain credibility and how do you do that with an authentic sense of self? And it is really complicated. Brandon, do you want to speak now that I've like brought your North Face pullover into the conversation?
No, you're totally fine. And I 100% agree with you because it's funny you say that because I was thinking I had gotten back from the store and I was like, okay, I have this panel and I need to change because I was just wearing like a t-shirt. Actually, I was wearing a tank top because it was 65 degrees in Chicago right now. It's beautiful weather. But I was like, I don't want to be like super professional, but like I don't want to like look like I didn't try. So I'm just gonna throw on like it's a collared pullover, and like
yeah.
I was like, yeah. And then I'm like, but I bet, like in my head, I was like, but I bet all the other panelists that are women are like, in their minds, they're like, wait, I have like, this is very nuanced and very different in how they have to approach it. So, and I was like, and you know, and that is the privilege of me being the white guy in the room, right? I am able to like wear this and not feel like I am being taken less seriously as a panelist here, even though I'm probably way less experienced in many ways than the rest of you all in terms of this type of conversation. So yeah, no, you're totally fine. I just thought it was really funny. I was like, yeah, you're right.
I mean, I think it's interesting that you did put some thought into like what you were going to wear for the panel today, though. So, you know, interesting. And I want to encourage our participants today and everybody watching to share your questions in the Q&A. We're going to be keeping track of those, and we will shift to Q&A here in a few minutes. I wondered if we could have each of the panelists just talk a little bit more about ways in which you advocate for equity and maybe some concrete kinds of things that you do or that anybody can do to try to bridge this gap, right? If we're talking about bridging the gender gap, like we know it's a problem, we know it's an issue, so what do we do about it? Can we take that back to Jackie?
Oh,
you're muted again, Jackie.
whoops. Honestly, this is all giving me such a kick because I'm like, oh yes, this is like a perfect example of exactly what I'm talking about. Like I will overthink everything and try to like, you know, play the game so that they can register me and my credibility. But maybe I just take a note from Brandon, right? Just go ahead and show up authentically. So with items to do, honestly, I'm a really big advocate of educate yourself. I'm a really big advocate of educate yourself. Like, this sounds harsh, but the internet exists, right? Like we have this like huge, like worldwide web of all this information. And there's a ton of information out there from folks with the identities themselves telling us their experiences. Cause I think oftentimes in social justice circles, we'll have like conversations about identities, but then no one of that identity is actually in the room and part of the conversation, which they don't necessarily have to be because it's not their job to educate us, but it's our responsibility, right, to like take that upon ourselves, like educate ourselves and figure out those answers. And then I also have, sorry, I'm just looking at my second screen here. So again, I know this sounds harsh, but I also have know your place, know your space. So I'm just thinking of, you know, if you're in a room of folks, for example, like I am a cisgender person. So if I'm in a room with folks who identify as trans, if they're having a conversation and if they're disclosing their experiences, if they're feeling, you know, brave enough to share that information with me, that is a time to know my place and know my space. This is not the time for me to interject with what I think their experiences might be. This isn't the time for me to interject with what I perceive their rights are and they aren't. It's just a time for me to listen. And if some of that includes me being humbled because you may have said some words or you may have done some things that have caused some harm, it's uncomfortable, but you sit with it. You sit with it and you sit with the discomfort and you go through it, right? And it's part of like going past that. I know a lot of folks are really familiar with like white fragility. It's essentially white fragility, but for every identity, right? Like just knowing your place, knowing your space, and listening in rooms when folks don't look like you or don't have the same experiences as you or don't have the same identities as you. Like that is a time to listen to them and hear their experiences.
Absolutely, Jackie. Know your place and know your space. I love that. And I think that goes right along with educate yourself, right? And educate yourself by reading and looking up information about anything and everything that you're interested in, but you know, then also putting yourself into those spaces where you have access to people who are different from you and take the opportunity to listen and let them share their story, not interject, right? But listen and really try to learn from people and their experiences. This is fantastic. Sophia, how about you? You want to talk a bit more about ways in which you think each of us can be advocates and work to bridge the gender gap?
Of course. Thank you, Jackie, for sure. Active listening, use it to, take that place to lean in and to hear from others, especially from marginalized identities, learn take it in, absorb it. Um, I would say, honestly, when it comes down to how can you advocate, how can you begin to if it's not even to do the work, how can you begin to understand it? And we're not necessarily looking for you to become so politically correct. And so this is what I'm sorry, I'm not about political correctness. I'm not about you understanding the right, well, how do I say it the right way? Or what's the right thing that I'm supposed to say? You know, I am someone who I need you to hear it. I need you to take it in, absorb it, and I need you to understand and reflect and see how does that impact you? How does that make you feel? Like Jackie stated, if you're uncomfortable with something that you've heard or you've seen or saw, sit in the space of discomfort, explore it, explore why a different gender or someone who identified with a different identity made your hair stick up on the back of your neck, made you just stiffen. Why did you stiffen? Explore that. That is an internal work that you will need to do and someone else cannot do for you, right? And until you take the time to sit and explore those feelings, and that's what's going to happen first, right? You're going to feel something before you say something. And so I want you to explore those feelings, and I want you to unpack it and find a space where you can begin to unpack and unravel, not with your friends that have the identity, but find a space where you can, you know what, go online, search, or connect with individuals that will support that conversation. Maybe it's a book club. Maybe it's an area where there's spaces where they're already having those conversations and you're wanting to understand more, right? And you're exploring gender identities, you're exploring intersectionality, you're exploring this. And that's the space where you can have those conversations. But don't go and tap your friend on your back and say, so I've been reading this, do you feel this way? Like, don't do that, right? Don't go to your bud, so your frat member, your kick it to the curb partner, and start questioning them about their experiences. That's not what we're stating for you to do at all. I'm stating you explore what you're feeling, sit in the discomfort, and then begin to look at it by doing the research, by connecting to groups in areas where they're having those conversations, and then you're going to be able to take on a place where you're saying, you know what, I want to learn more. I want to go to this event that's being put on by this group, or you know what, I want to do this, or you're going to find yourself wanting to take on and to be in those spaces and to support individuals within those spaces. And so once you begin with yourself, then the true work will begin. That's my advice.
Sophia, that is amazing. Like, I just love the very just like real direct nature of that, and sitting with that discomfort and, pushing yourself. Like, that's how we learn, right? Getting out of our comfort zone and sitting with that discomfort and then thinking about what it means is so important. We have some amazing questions coming in on the chat. So we'll work our way through as many of these as we can. I know everybody's getting some great ideas now. We've got a couple of really practical kinds of questions. So we have a question here from Bailey about tips on confronting or having a conversation with a superior about a raise if you're not getting paid the same as your coworkers with the same qualifications, or basically just asking for a raise as a woman. Anyone want to tackle that, right? Because that's one thing we haven't really addressed yet, is the wage gap. And how do you go about getting that same pay? What would be recommendations from any of you? Any panelists want to volunteer to tackle that one? Sophia?
I guess I will tackle and do the best that I can. First and foremost, definitely know the space. Make sure that you're familiar with and you're aware of, well, you're not just hearing from someone else that they're making this much, right? But you're aware of your worth and then the work that you're doing. And also you have had the ability to tap in and see within the framework of where you're working that, hey, wait a minute, I've identified that there are several individuals, not just one person, but several individuals that are making a certain amount of money, or than myself. So it could be $2, could be $5, could be $10. Once you have identified that, that is a true conversation that you need to have, and you need to go ahead and set the meeting up with that superior, right? You need to just go ahead and have the conversation. I will, in my experience, and I'll definitely share. I'll share a real experience of my own. When I was basically was looking at the fact that someone was trying to base my pay off of another female individual that had formerly worked within the space. I completely disagreed with that vice president, which was a heterosexual male who just thought, oh well, you're just you're another director. You can make the same thing that she made, and you should be okay with that, right? Don't go in and accept the first thing that somebody throws at you and says, oh, okay, well, here, accept this. If you're truly aware of your worth and the work that you are capable of, bring that to them. Bring them how you bring value to the organization, and how the work that you have done or you're going to do will add value to that organization, to that unit, and make them aware of, hey, you've done the work, and this is what the area is. So this is what is stated for the median wage or the average wage. And so when you have that information in front of you, have the conversation. Don't be afraid to have the conversation, because if that supervisor or that person who's your direct supervisor really values your work, they will take that into consideration. They are truly going to take that into consideration, and they will begin to look at that. Now, if they don't, then there's a whole nother thing going on with the institution. If they do not begin to question, were they inequitable when they paid you? They cannot question their own practice. Now it's time to consider the practice of that institution. That's my thought.
All right. Thank you for that, Sophia. It's a great topic, and we could stay on it probably for several hours. I want to get to some more of the questions that are coming in on the Q&A as well. And this one is also from an anonymous person, so I'm not sure who it is, but great question. So the question is about toxic masculinity, and the person is curious if our panelists have an opinion on how toxic masculinity may play into how each gender or race enters a room and what hat they approach a situation with. Brandon, we haven't heard from you for a while. Do you want to tackle that one for us?
Sure, I'd be more than happy to. So a couple pieces to that. So in terms of the toxic masculinity, we see that in every aspect of society, right? This is not just a very nuanced piece, like where it's only in one particular context, like in schooling or in like the workplace, but this really truly permeates all of society, right? It's how we deal with media, it's representation, it's how men are supposed to act, right? So I would say, in terms of toxic masculinity and how do we kind of approach that, it really comes down to what the space is, right? So what is that, because there's a lot of ways that toxic masculinity can play out. It can come out in the way that somebody's referencing you, in the way somebody's speaking to you, touching you, all of these things. So, but really it's going to come down to really pushing back against this individual and their belief system, right? So there's a lot of internal biases there that says, depending on the type of aspect of toxic masculinity we're talking about, is that like men are quote unquote superior, or that they're supposed to be alpha, they're supposed to be strong, no emotions, all of these things. And it creates a very toxic, very problematic, very divisive space, right? So I think that first and foremost, like you have to go right at it. There's no pulling punches here, especially because this is often very violent to women and very violent towards particularly women of color and those who might have less privilege in those spaces. So if you have that type of privilege, like such as I, as a white male, taking that approach and being like, hey, that's like what you did or what you said was really inappropriate. And it really stems from what I'm assuming is toxic masculinity. Here's what I'm seeing. Do you see what I'm seeing, right? Because like you don't want to attack them, because once you attack them, you're pushing them out of the window and they're never going to want to change. And they're not really going to question what they're doing, but you need to push back against it in order to make sure that not only number one, are you protecting the space, especially if it's a safe space for what's supposed to be an open dialogue, but also are you trying to help somebody actually figure out what they're doing is wrong, what they're saying is wrong, right? Depending on the level, you may not want to do that. You may want to just completely exile this person from that space because you can't allow them to, like, once again, take that space from whomever is speaking or whatever's happening. But we do want to try and still educate people as much as possible, but also not at the expense of other people's safety, right? So that's one thing that you have to consider in these times and in those conversations. But that's kind of like on a case-on-case basis. And in terms of like the hat I'm wearing, right? So the hat is really dependent upon where I'm at and what space I'm at. So if I'm teaching, if I'm in a classroom and I'm teaching my high schoolers, the first and foremost thing is I'm protecting my students, right? Like I need to make sure that the rest of my students are safe. They're not being violated in any way. They're not being told anything that can be very violent towards them. And by violent, I don't necessarily always mean physical violence, but there's also mental and emotional violence, right? So just something to be careful of. But then if I'm in a room with my friends, right? Like I have a bunch of guy friends that still perpetuate a lot of these things sometimes. And I'm like, hey, we should talk about what you just said because that was really inappropriate. This is why it's inappropriate, and try and help them like get to this point. But once again, if I'm in the space of like my school and I'm teaching, I can't allow that type of conversation, that type of rhetoric to affect my students. But really, I would say, long story short, I think what you're going to need to do is really approach the situation depending on what's going on. But at the end of the day, it's always going to be about pushing back against that person, if not completely like making them reevaluate what they're doing, because they are oftentimes creating a really hostile environment for a lot of people that we're here hopefully having these conversations to protect, right? And help. So that would be my 2 cents in. If Jackie or Sophia, if you want to add into that at all.
Do you have anything you wanted to add, Jackie?
I was just going to say, I feel like the conversation I was having earlier about like code switching when entering a room is very much this, but not just toxic masculinity. Like that's also rooted in white supremacy of just like reading the room and okay, this is how I'm gonna act, and like I said earlier, like it's not something that I'm like promoting or anything like that. I should be able to just carry myself authentically in that space, and the reason I'm not is because I'm just obviously working through my own internalized stuff, but then it's also this, right? Like you walk into a room and you read the room to map it to safety, right? And if it's maybe not feeling super safe for you, then you do address things in a different way, or you do maybe not participate. Or if you find that it's a safe space, you're like, I'm going to really participate and say all the things that I want to say. But yeah, I was just going to reiterate, like, I feel like that's definitely what rooted in this.
Very good. Sophia, did you have anything you wanted to add on?
No, I definitely agree, Jackie and Brandy. You really brought brought that perspective, and honestly, truly, if there's for me, I don't want to say guard yourself, but you do have to protect yourself in these spaces. And I know that we want to be our authentic self. We want to be, and I want everyone to be their authentic self, and I don't want you to be anyone else but you, baby, but you. But know the space that you're going into, and you do have to assess the room, and you have to begin to look at the space to see, within this room and in this space, will these be individuals that will be able to lean into, who I am and what I'm bringing into this conversation? Or am I going to have a fight, a battle of defending and protecting who I am? Do you want to, is that the conversation or the engagement you want to get into? So yes, it is using your best ability to assess a space, understand it, to read it, because there is the area of protecting you and not allowing others to come in and attack who you are, right? And I must thank Jackie and Brandon, spot on. That's
Fantastic.
Thank you, Sophia. That's like, yeah, everything.
Yeah, so good. And I think we have time for one more question. We have a great question in the Q&A from Riley. which says, I was discussing with someone my sexuality here at WSU recently, to which they responded, "That's cool and all. I just don't know what I would do if that were my kid." And I didn't even know what to say to that. How would you recommend I respond to something like that in the future? Jackie?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So for folks who don't know, I do identify as queer. And so I've actually been told this before, and it's not a good feeling. It's a really devastating feeling. It seems like such a minor comment, and it seems like something that they just kind of like slide out there, but it means so much more, right? It means that there's some strong feelings there about that sexuality that doesn't make it okay for their kids to be that. And, you know, those conversations are so complicated. There's no one right answer of how exactly to address a situation. But I think something that has worked for me is me telling folks, like, I've been the person in the room hearing that comment, and I know I'm not the only one. You never know people's sexuality, sexual orientation. They're not necessarily always out. There are definitely still folks in the queer community who are closeted, and you never know who's going to be around. And so if you assume everyone around you is queer and you made that comment, would you feel okay about it still? And so I feel like, and again, you know, I'm not going to tell anybody how to address that conversation, because if you want to say that is very hurtful and very toxic, you are well within your right to say that. But if this is like a friend that you're wanting to like sensitively approach this, I feel like that's the approach that I would personally take, is just trying to say, you never know who's in the room and who's going to hear that and who's going to take that home with them. Because I think I'm definitely going to butcher it, but I know there's like a Maya Angelou quote of like, people never remember what you say or what you do, but they definitely remember how you made them feel. And that is very, very strong. I think that really embodies like what that quote specifically is. Like, I would never want my kid to do that. That cuts really deep.
Thank you for that, Jackie. That's really powerful. Sophia, did you want to follow that up?
I did. I wanted to basically say, for the person who most likely would probably make a comment like this, that would say, because there's individuals out there, they'll make the statement, own it, say, you know what, I need you to be aware that, whoa, what I said was not okay. And you need to own it and apologize. And that's where we have to begin to help individuals to say, that was not okay. What you said was not okay. So, and not to say we have to consistently check people, but if that's a friend, then they should be okay with sitting with something that you told, that you were able to go to them and say, what you said to me, that hurt. And that gives them the ability to say, whoa, okay, they need to do some internal work and then check themselves. So, yeah, definitely, make them aware that cut.
Absolutely. Brandon, I think we have about 1 minute if you want to follow that up.
Yeah, I'll jump in there real
Start to
quick.
wrap
So I also am queer. So I've had, I don't know if I've ever actually had anybody say that to me, thankfully, or not thankfully, depending on how you look at it. But I would say, like, my biggest thing, and this is once again coming from a place of privilege, or if you feel the comfortability to do this, I would be like, what do you mean by that? Like, why would that not be okay? Because then they have to sit there and be like, oh, well, and it's like, yeah, now you really got to tell me what you really mean here, because what you're actually saying is like, I actually don't agree with you. However, I can't say that because politically that's not acceptable. So then that really pushes them to either really kind of out themselves as a homophobic person, or they actually have to kind of sit there and really resonate, kind of like I would, echo what Sophia was saying too, about like they need to sit there and like resonate with that and like really think through it and do that internalized work that you talked about a little bit earlier. And kind of like it goes back to this idea, what Sophia was talking about too earlier, is we have a very intellectual reaction and we have a very visceral reaction. Like intellectually, I'm like, yeah, I agree with that, or like I can see that, that's cool. But viscerally, I'm like, I don't want that. And it's like, well, why do you not want that? So that would be all I kind of have to say about that. But I love making people uncomfortable when they say things like that. And I'm like, yes, you made me feel this way. I'm gonna make you feel this way 10 times worse, because you are doing this not probably because they just don't understand, but also we need to have those conversations. So yeah, that would be my thoughts.
I think that's a great way to kind of finish us up, Brandon. And I have to say, from like a communication perspective, that's such a good approach, right? Turn it back on them and say like, oh, well, why is that? And then put them in a position to have to explain. And then once they explain, perhaps they start to feel some discomfort there, which is exactly what we want to do. So unfortunately, we are about out of time. The hour has flown by, and I feel like there's so much more that we could talk about. It's been such an amazing conversation, and I'm just incredibly grateful for the opportunity to moderate the panel today and hear from all of you. And I hope all of our attendees got something really fantastic out of it as well. And I think, Dave, did you want to come back on the line and just do a wrap up and